Okay, we're gonna get started here if everyone wants to take a seat. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Nicole. I'm a library with the Adult Services Department here, and I welcome you to the library this evening. I would also like to welcome our viewers watching online via the live stream. Please note the feedback forms that are in the back and take a moment to fill one out before you leave. These program forms help us develop more programs like this one, so we really appreciate your feedback. Today's talk is part of the Your Mind and Health series being presented by the University of Arkansas Department of Psychological Sciences. We have a flyer on the back table listing all of the programs. Each will be recorded and viewable on the library's YouTube channel. The next program on December 1st will be about cannabis and science versus media. Today's presentation is about how avoidance maintains anxiety. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Morgan Middlebrooks. Is it Morgan? I didn't plan this program. I didn't type this up.
It was Harrison. He's right there.
Morgan is a doctoral student of clinical psychology where she studies anxiety and cognitive control. Her clinical work is with individuals with anxiety disorders and/or personality disorder. Please help me in welcoming Morgan.
Thank you, guys. Welcome. I think you can hear me, even if it feels weird how I'm hearing me. Welcome. So as she mentioned, my name is Morgan Middlebrooks, and I'm a doctoral candidate of clinical psychology here at the University of Arkansas. And part of the reason that I wanted to talk about anxiety today is, one, because it's a natural experience that we all go through, we all fight through, and two, because this happens to be my research topic of interest. So I've been studying anxiety, particularly in relation to cognitive control, which is a fancy, broad way of saying impulse control to some degree. So I've been studying anxiety and cognitive control for a long time. I started studying in grad school in 2018, but I've been in psych since 2010. And throughout this time, I have been studying anxiety as like my primary area of interest. And what's unique about clinical psych training is that we are trained to be both clinicians and scientists. So what we do in the science arena, we often take into practice. And so today I want to talk a little bit about anxiety, what I've learned from research and what I've learned from clinical practice. So that's what we're going to look at today. So I first want to kind of start out by mentioning that anxiety is a normal experience. Everyone experiences anxiety. And since we're in the library, I thought we would talk a little bit about anxiety through the lens of art or writing, my favorite style, which is music. So throughout history, we can find examples of people trying to talk about anxiety through the lens of their own personal experiences. If you're a fan of Paramore or you were an emo scene kid, side swoop type of person in the 2000s, you may know about Hayley Williams' song Pressure. And in the song Pressure, she's talking about the pressure of performing, the pressure of standing on stage, and how it feels like it's something that can break her, how she fears that she can't take it. We see lines like this all through music. We see it through writing. You see it in art. And I show this to you guys because I want to normalize the experience of anxiety. We all go through it. Anxiety is a universal experience. People have found this across so many studies. When we talk about emotions that people all kind of tend to experience, anxiety is on that list. But if you've been on TikTok lately, then you also know how badly people want to get rid of anxiety. They talk about my anxiety like it's an emotion that belongs specifically to them, rather than a universal experience, which is what it is. So let's define anxiety. One thing that scientists love to do is define a term because we want everyone to be on the same page. When we talk about anxiety, it can mean a lot of things, but when I talk about anxiety, I'm specifically talking about a common emotion that's characterized by apprehension or worry, and also a somatic experience of tension. And when I say a somatic experience of tension, what I mean is that your muscles can become tense when you're anxious, your palms can get sweaty, you can want to grip the side of a podium because you're like a little bit nervous up here. Your heart may start beating rapidly, like mine was on the way to this conversation. People who experience a lot of anxiety may notice feelings of tension in their neck, in their back. Anxiety can give us this experience of like, ugh, I gotta get ready. I need to be prepared. On the topic of preparedness, anxiety is an adaptive emotion. How can this thing that is so uncomfortable also be adaptive? You're like, really? Adaptive? One way that anxiety can be adaptive is through threat detection. Anxiety can be like your brain's early warning system. Imagine you're driving in Dallas, Texas, and the threat on the road is a 19-year-old boy in a huge truck with wheels set out to the side, texting. You need to be ready, right? You need to be alert and aware, because as you're driving in that Dallas traffic, if you're a little bit anxious and a little bit worried, you may notice Chad about to hit you as he goes over that center line. We can catch a potential threat before they become real problems. Thank you, anxiety. We can get ready for a fight. If you're walking home alone from Dixon Street and you hear the pitter-patter of someone's steps behind you, and you start to notice the sound of it, the feeling of it, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'm getting tense, I'm ready. So if that person were to fight you, your body is ready. Thank you, anxiety, for protecting me from threats. Can also enhance vigilance and focus at mild to moderate levels. If anxiety is not a huge problem, then it can help you notice detail. It can help monitor for threat-related information. It can help you kind of scan the environment and take things in. And that can help us stay alert or uncertain in risky situations. Thank you, anxiety. And it can also motivate preparation. Maybe if you've ever taken a test like all of us are always doing in grad school, then you may know the feeling, I have an upcoming test. I need to prepare. Anxiety tells us to prepare. It helps us say, okay, we need to have some future-oriented thinking here. Anxiety can also support social survival because it helps us be adverse to conflict and sensitive to others. We can notice things about others. Maybe you're going to a party and you're brand new to the party. You're like the new guy in town. You're from Missouri. And so you come to this Arkansas party and you're like, oh, I'm kind of uncomfortable. Like, what does Missouri have to do with Arkansas? And you notice other people's reactions to you. You know when to say a little bit more or a little bit less. You know not to get into a conflict because it could go weird and people might have uncomfortable feelings around you. And in that way, we can maintain group harmony. Thank you, anxiety. It can also help us learn from past threats. Anxiety can help us encode how we survived. For me, anxiety reminds me not to talk too much about neuroscience at a party because people don't like it. It's really boring. It helps me survive that social situation, right? Thank you. It also can help us manage risk. It can encourage caution and promote behavior that encourages caution. If you're anything like me, an Arkansas girl, you like going to the river and jumping into it from something tall, whether it's a bridge or a cliff or a rock or your brother's unstable shoulders, you like to jump into the river. And sometimes that's a problem because there are rocks. Anxiety tells me, slow down, Morgan. Make sure you let some other yahoo jump first. See how deep it is. Anxiety tells us to be cautious. Thank you, anxiety. And one thing that I always like to remind myself and others of is that anxiety helps us protect our values. Sometimes we feel anxious because something matters. I felt anxious about this presentation because I like speaking to the community. I want to do it more. It matters to me. It reminds me to highlight what's important. It says, hey, don't forget to practice. Don't forget to make your slides. But anxiety can go wrong. We hear about anxiety disorders all of the time. So this adaptive emotion goes wrong sometimes. In fact, anxiety is our most common mental disorder. It affects about 20% of the American population every year across disorders. For some disorders, this is higher. And although anxiety is highly treatable, only about 1 in 4 get treatment. And what I like to do is consider anxiety the adaptive emotion through the lens of dysfunction when we're talking about an anxiety disorder. How do we take this really normal experience, this experience that we're wired to have? Some people even believe, our evolutionary psychologists will tell you, that anxiety helps keep us alert during a time when a saber-toothed tiger might chase you down. We don't have any saber-toothed tigers, but we do have emails. And so in that way, our threat system can kind of be a little bit flawed these days. Maybe our threat system was really about running from real, true blue threats like those that we would find in the wild. But today, our threats are things like missed calls, emails, endless text messages, demands on our time, not enough money, not enough sleep, not enough food. There's always something, right, that can make us our batteries kind of deplete. And so when does it move into disorder? When is anxiety becoming not our normal adaptive friend, but a real problem? Again, I like to think about dysfunction. When anxiety starts to get in the way of everyday life and makes everyday functioning harder, that's when I think we can start to see anxiety as more dysfunctional. Does it cause you significant distress? Is it different than what's culturally normal? So in that example, it kind of means like it's normal, right, to feel a little bit anxious before you speak, especially if you want to do a good job. It may be less normal to be screaming or crying or whatever before. Maybe that's when it starts to become significantly distressing and is a little bit outside cultural norms. It's a little bit atypical. That's when we can kind of get into these anxiety disorders. So our common anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety, is about excessive worry, worrying about nearly everything for most of the day, every day. It can include things like our anxious arousal, our somatic bodily experience of anxiety, like sweating, tension, kind of tapping your foot, that kind of agitated feeling of being keyed up. Can include things like restlessness, poor sleep, trouble concentrating, because when anxiety is disordered, it takes up a lot of mental space. And we only have so much mental space. So if our anxiety is taken up a lot, we don't have a lot left for decision making or even managing the anxiety so that we're not in a worry spiral right before bed, messing up our sleep. I'm not going to get into every single disorder, but the other one that I think that people often talk about is panic disorder. That's whenever you have a panic attack and associate something neutral with fear, like maybe your car with fear, and then you decide, I'm not going to drive anymore. Or maybe social anxiety disorder, where you have such an overwhelming experience of anxiety about social situations, particularly the fear of being judged or making a mistake, that you don't go at all. And your world starts to shrink and shrink and shrink. So how does this happen? How can we take Paramore, Haley Williams' words of, because I fear I might break and I fear I can't take it, how do we get to that point where we fear we can't take it? When does anxiety go from this adaptive, helpful emotion preparing us for the saber-toothed emails of the world into something that just doesn't work? Scientists have tried to explain this in many different ways, and I'm going to show you guys some of the ways that I like to explain it through the lens of science. One is through Mohr's two-factor theory. This is ultimately a learning theory. So if you guys remember Pavlov and his dogs, our friend, I think it's Ivan or Ivanov, I can never remember, but Pavlov, he trained a dog to salivate, to get spit in his mouth every time he heard a bell or a metronome. How would you make a dog's mouth water over a bell? That's not tasty. One way of doing that is ringing a bell every time the dog eats something that they like. And the next thing you know, this neutral stimulus, this bell, every time you ring it, the dog's feeling hungry. It's kind of like if you're driving down MLK, down what I like to call Chicken Strip, and you see your favorite chicken place. Why does the Popeyes sign make me hungry? The sign is not tasty, but it is a neutral stimulus that I paired with something tasty, spicy chicken tenders. And so in that way, we can learn that something neutral is anxiety-provoking. So for example, maybe your neighbor has a really cool car that's blocking your driveway, and you really need him to move. And you go over to him and you say, hey, can you move? And he gets mad. I don't have time for you. I'll move my car when I feel like it. And then you don't feel good. That made you feel super uncomfortable. So you learned, right, that the car can symbolize conflict. Before, we just thought this was a pretty sick car. But now the car is symbolizing conflict. So maybe 2 days later, the car is back again. And we feel anxious. The old man's not there. He's not there to yell at us, but still, there's anxiety about seeing the car. So you stay behind your blinds and you wait. You wait for him to leave. You avoid confronting the problem of the car. Now you feel relief. You feel happy. So now we've paired avoiding anxiety, avoiding asking someone to leave, with anxiety, and we feel good about it. This is kind of like the way we could look at it in a more words perspective. I like pictures, so here's the words version, right? You have classical conditioning where you acquire a fear. You learn that the car is scary, the email is scary. This really natural stimulus becomes associated with threat, and every time you see it, you get this sense of anxiety, even if you don't really know why. So then you maintain your fear by avoiding it. Avoidance is really nice because it gives us immediate relief. And it also reinforces the cycle of avoiding what scares you. And so what you ultimately learn is, I can't handle this. This is too much. Another unfortunate element of how anxiety goes wrong is that we can develop a pretty severe intolerance of uncertainty. So you're telling me that nothing scary happened. There was no guy yelling at you next to his car. You just have a sense of unease. Sometimes our sense of uncertainty and unease can be triggered by something that's new. One time I went to a Korean spa in Dallas and I didn't know how it was going to go. And it weirded me out so bad that I just didn't know how it was going to go. It ended up being the time of my life. But as I walked in those doors and had no idea how it was going to go, I felt the urge to leave. Because I thought that something really catastrophic could happen. What could happen catastrophically in a well-rated spa? I don't know. But I got a fear, and I started thinking about it a lot, which then made me think more about unpredictability, more uncertainty. More uncertainty is catastrophic. And maybe I engage in a safety behavior, such as, hey, are you sure this is okay? Are you sure? Are you sure? Me telling myself, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. Or maybe I leave, and I prove to myself that not only can I not tolerate the uncertainty, but that the spa is scary, and this is not a place to be. This can happen in everyday life, right? You get some news. Maybe you took an STD result, or took an STD test, and you don't know what the result is going to be. Maybe there's no good reason for you to think it's going to go wrong, but seeing that result, that uncertainty, it can make you say, no, thank you. I'm not going to open the test. I'm not going to look. I cannot bear it. If you ever watch any TV shows about medical stuff, like House, then you know that when somebody has like bad results coming in, like they're not sure if they're going to get the cancer diagnosis or not, one option to comfort yourself in that moment is just to simply not look. You'll feel a lot better. You'll feel happier, right? And so what you do is you keep deepening your intolerance for uncertainty. Every time something uncertain happens, you say, no, that's too much. I can't do that. And over time, your tolerance for the unknown shrinks. But life is kind of unknown in so many different ways. So we're also shrinking our life here. A therapy called ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, kind of brings these ideas together. And again, this is not every model of anxiety. This is not the best model of anxiety. I don't know how you would decide which one is best, right? I'm a scientist. It all just depends. But one thing that I like to think about is like the practicality of this. And this is often how it plays out for my clients. Something triggers anxiety. Maybe it's the dark, going outside at night. You had a bad experience at night where something scared you. Whether it was a real threat, like someone who intended to harm you, or if it was like a cat jumping out of nowhere and just gave you like a whoa. Whatever it is, anxiety trigger of night. That can lead to avoidance. I'm not going to go outside at night. I feel better now because I'm not going to the trash can at night, whatever it is. It reinforces the idea that night is scary. That lowers your tolerance for distress. Now, maybe sundown is scary. That means that your tolerance for distress is now lower. That's kind of a problem because it means that other threats that are maybe smaller feel worse because we cannot tolerate that distress. And then another anxiety trigger. More avoidance, more relief, more reinforcement of anxiety, more lowering of distress tolerance. Over time, this becomes disordered. This cycle of avoidance continues to fuel anxiety and can reduce your quality of life. As your anxiety increases over time, you can get a sense of things feel overwhelming. Your baseline of anxiety gets higher every day, which could make your tolerance for it lower. You know, it's kind of like imagine having a bad day and getting bad news, much worse than having a good day and then getting bad news. Same thing. If we increase our daily experience of anxiety, experiences of other anxiety can feel worse. This can mean that you have fewer experiences, strained relationship, missed goals. I'm so tired of you canceling on me. Why can't you just show up? That lowers our quality of life. It limits personal growth, and then there's a sense of like, I feel trapped. I can't do anything. It lowers our own beliefs about our own self-efficacy and what is possible in our lives. Creates a system of why try? It gives us short-term relief to say, you know what, now that I've canceled plans on my friend, I feel better. But that means the next time there are plans, you have created a scenario where the anxiety is harder to overcome. What's really weird about worry is that it can give us the experience of the bad time. If you are worrying a lot about, will I be funny at this talk? Will anyone think it's interesting? Will I bore everyone to death? Will all of my colleagues be like, why did we let her do this again? And then you avoid it. Like, I experienced the negative emotion of failure with no proof that I was actually going to fail, except for the proof that I made up in my mind. Doing the thing gives you counter evidence. There are a handful of people in this room that I know like going two-stepping. And if you go two-stepping or swing dancing, you know that there's this sense of anxiety. For me, it's always, what are the steps? There's 2 of them, and I can't remember 1 or 2. Turns out it's 3, maybe. Ask Kevin, he would know. But not going proves to me that I will not learn to two-step. But every time I do 2 steps on my date's shoe, and it works out just fine anyways, and I have a great time, strangely, at the VFW, it reminds me that life has a lot to offer, even if it's scary. But avoidance is not just about leaving a scary situation. Avoidance can also be something that is kind of an internal experience. Maybe we're worried about two-stepping, and instead of giving it a rest because it's not helping us out, we've already played out every scenario, we've already figured out every way we could fail, Why kick a down dog? Maybe we'll do some thought suppression and say, I can't even think about that. Maybe we'll numb out and say, I'm going to doom scroll all night long so I don't have to think about tomorrow's test. Maybe we're going to mentally check out and just not experience the anxiety, just kind of like, no thanks. Maybe we're going to do some reassurance seeking in our own head. I'm fine. Nothing's going to happen, over and over and over. Never letting ourselves feel the anxiety, recognizing that this is an emotion we can tolerate. This is an emotion that's giving us some information even. We're blocking off that information so that we can avoid it. But I would argue that it's important to break the cycle of anxiety and build a little bit of grit. So in the world of science, you can think about grit as a goal-directed version of learning where you engage in approach behaviors to teach the brain that discomfort is not a threat. That's a long-winded way of saying try the stuff that scares you and see how it goes. Don't count yourself out. When you have repeated confrontation with goal-related discomfort, such as writing when you feel stuck, grad students, training when you're tired, athletes, dancers, studying when you feel anxious about the test, it can build tolerance for that discomforting feeling. Just like anything else that you start doing that makes you feel anxious. If you drive every day, you stop thinking about the moments when you were 15 years old wondering if you were going to rear end every person that passed you somehow. And these exposures can actually weaken our discomfort pathway. We have a new learning process. Just like Pavlov's dogs, we can learn something new. We can learn this feeling isn't dangerous. I can stay with it. I can sit in my anxiety for a moment instead of trying to run as far from it as I can. We can update our beliefs about stress or threat. Instead of catastrophizing failure and thinking it's the end of the world, we can learn from failure. We can learn from boredom or exhaustion or uncertainty. And our competing behavior begins to strengthen. We can, as we engage with the task, we can have a stronger task engagement response than avoidance. We may feel pulled to avoid all of the time because we don't like to feel uncomfortable. We live in a world full of comfort. There are tons of examples that I can think of times when you can have a small threat. I decided recently I wanted to learn film photography, but I hate the uncomfortable social interactions with nerds who know a lot about things they love and they make you feel kind of dumb, and I was like, I don't want to do this. I have an option. I can go into Bedford Camera and get my film and have a lovely weekend, or I can avoid that because I don't feel comfortable about it. One path can prove my point that going in is uncomfortable. Another one, going in could also challenge my point that going in was uncomfortable. And it turned out Bedford Camera's lovely. And so gritty behavior ultimately is a reflection of new learning. This isn't about moral character or like being tougher than others. This is about your willingness to try and try again. My clients tell me all the time, but I'm too tired for grit. I'm exhausted, Morgan. I've been trying and trying again. And that's fair. Sometimes grit takes more strength than we have in a moment, but there are ways that we can kind of expand our capacity, right? We can do things like restoring our internal system. Emotions are thought to naturally arise and fade. Let them. Try not to add on. When you're feeling anxious, you don't also have to say, and I'm a loser. You could just let it rise and fall. When you're feeling anxious, you don't have to say, I can't do this. I can't do anything. Try not to add on. Take a rest. See if it rises and falls. Approach it with curiosity rather than judgment. Remember, anxiety is there for us. It's there to help us approach threat, to do what scares us, to prepare us, to show us what's important. Thank you, anxiety. Can we take a moment to go on a little walk? But not a rumination walk, right? Let's not go on a walk and think about every horrible thing that's going to happen. Let's think about how cute the squirrels are. Maybe you're having a hard time managing anxiety because you are hungry and thirsty. Maybe eat a little bit of something and then reapproach that thing that's freaking you out. Self-control and persistence, grit, that can rely on the energy that's available to us. It's not weakness, it's biology. Make sure you take care of yourself so that you can take care of your goals too. Or maybe you made a really lofty goal. You said, I'm going to get a doctorate. What? That mountain is too big. Make the first step microscopic. I'm going to write a personal statement. Maybe you have an entire paper to write and it feels overwhelming. I can't do this. One option is to avoid it and let it get scarier and scarier as the day goes by, and you get the more and more emails from your advisor that are like, where's the update? Where's the update? Maybe try writing one sentence. Maybe you have so much to read it feels unbearable. Maybe try reading one page. Open a document and do nothing else. Send one email. Maybe you have fitness goals that feel further than you could ever reach. Can you walk for 3 minutes instead of 30 so that maybe next week we can do 4 minutes? These micro goals can help us maintain the identity of I'm a person who tries rather than I'm a person who fails. Self-compassion is important. And one way that we can be compassionate is about being realistic about our goals. Are they obtainable? Probably. Do we need to break them into smaller steps? Sometimes. Can use this idea of minimum effective effort. Ask yourself, what is the smallest action that moves this forward? I'm scared of driving. What is the smallest action that can move it forward? Could it be sitting in the car and getting really familiar with all of the controls? This helps us avoid shame-based avoidance or prevent shame-based avoidance, and it can help us build momentum. Motivation comes from doing, not thinking. Think about, here I am, contradicting myself, right? Think about the last time you wanted to go on a run. The more you think about it, especially if you're me, you're like, ugh, what shoes will I wear? I don't know about that. This is miserable. It's always miserable. And then you go on a run and it's beautiful and it ends up being just fine. The motivation to do it again typically comes from doing it, not from thinking about doing it. And whenever you do minimum effort, we can also reduce our perceived effort. If you have an entire list of things you have to do in a day and you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, is it possible to identify the smallest step that will move your day forward? Can we send the nonsense easy emails that are like, nope, 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 or whatever it is? Can we go, I don't know, I work at the law school doing therapy for law students, and one of the things, I get overwhelmed by how many clients I have and how many notes I have to take and how many emails I have to answer. And so my tactic is like, let's just answer emails first because they're easiest. It's going to be easier than everything else I do today. And sometimes that gives the energy to move forward. And I also think it's really important to identify which kind of tired are you. Not all fatigue is the same, but oftentimes if we can name it, we can tame it. Physical fatigue may be preventing you from pushing through and doing the thing that scares you. Try rest. Try eating lunch. Try hydration. Coffee is not hydration. Maybe your brain is tired. Maybe you're a grad student who's been reading stuff all day long. Or even a high school or middle school student all day learning, learning, learning. Maybe you need some novelty. Maybe you need to take a break or to change tasks. But the goal here is not to just give up or to quit. It's to rest with intentionality. This isn't giving up. It's speeding up. It's slowing down to speed up later. Maybe you're having emotional fatigue. You miss your cat, you're tired, you don't see your friends that often because you're in grad school once again. Why do we keep signing up for grad school, you guys? Try stuff like grounding. Can you take a moment to notice the world around you instead of the mind that plagues you? Can you feel the chair underneath you right now? Can you hear my voice and the little echo that I sometimes get? Is the temperature right or wrong? Can you be in this moment? Can you take yourself out of your mind and into the world? Grounding, doing some sort of self-soothing activities, whether it's a nice bath, a long shower, a walk, asking your cat about his accounting business, whatever it is. Maybe you need some connection to see your friends, to laugh a little bit, to be part of the world. Maybe after doing a little bit of that, we can start talking about doing what scares us. Or maybe you're having some existential fatigue. Why am I trying so hard to jump into this pit of snakes? What, for the whole do what scares you thing? No, it's because you have a value of being on fear factor, a value of entertainment for others or something. Or maybe your value is teaching, and so you have to get over the fear of presenting. You want people to know about the science that you love. Sometimes we can be a little bit too tired for grit, but taking a break so that we can try again helps develop grit. So, talk too fast, you guys. So, ultimately, what I want to convey with this talk is that the goal is not to push through no matter what. You don't push through all anxiety just because. But the goal is to say that it's good to persist with care, strategy, and recovery. Be intentional. Think about what anxiety is trying to tell you. Is it saying, hey, you're anxious because this matters? Why would you run? Connect to your values. Is anxiety telling you you're anxious because this is dangerous? Don't run. Look around. Approach anxiety with curiosity rather than avoidance. Because the more we run from what scares us, the scarier it becomes. I don't know if you guys have ever had the experience of walking to your car at night in the Arkansas country and there's like a coyote like yelling in the background. Every moment that you run towards the car, it can build. You're like, oh my gosh, this is scaring me. And then you get back in and it turns out it was fine. So the goal is persistence. Try. Just try. So because it's a library, we'll end with a little bit of poetry from Mary Oliver called I Worried. I show this often to my therapy clients who struggle with worry, struggle with letting go, as a way to kind of normalize the experience. So Mary Oliver said, I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and I gave it up. And I took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. Thank you, guys. I saved time for questions. It wasn't even about me talking too fast. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer if I can.
I kind of feel like some of the reason for the anxiety is not knowing how to approach with care, right? It kind of, sometimes it feels like circular, right? So it's like, oh, well, I don't have the anxiety. The anxious all I have to do is approach the situation intelligently, but I'm too dumb. I don't know how to approach it intelligently, and so then it goes back, kind of. And I mean, I don't know, is there like some other kind of, I I hate to ask, is still like a general or generic strategy for things like that, you know, when you just feel completely lost or whatever?
Sure. I mean, I think that like the feeling of loss is an emotion that can give you information, right? It's like I'm anxious, but I'm more than that. I'm anxious because I'm feeling lost. Oftentimes when people are lost, they seek a guide, right? Like I don't know how to register with the registrar. Maybe I need to call the registrar. And so to me, identifying that emotion of like not only do I feel anxious, but I also feel lost, it gives you really good information about where to go. What do people do when they're lost? They look for a guide. What are you lost on? Is there a guide in that area? Like for me, I don't really know anything about cars. And so if I feel anxious about like my car being broken, and I'm like, I don't know anything about this, then I can look to a guide because I know that I feel lost. That's kind of what I would say. Yeah. Harrison?
Yeah, morning, great talk. So a lot of the talk today was focused on situations in which there's not a saber-tooth tiger.
Right.
Right, that we're kind of living in a modern world that's a lot safer and for a lot of reasons. But there are also times where people go through horrible things, and some of these things are probably things that are adaptive to fear.
Mm-hmm.
So like being assaulted or things like that. So I wonder if you could speak to like how this idea of avoidance plays out and fears that we can kind of like understand and justify.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair question because there are like saber-toothed tigers of the world, right? Like we know that people get sexually assaulted, we know that people experience battery, theft, all kind, crime, right? And so it is true that there are certain things that we can do that we can, use to protect ourselves or help control a situation. Like maybe at night you can walk in a lighted path. But part of what I think avoidance does is tells us that we can control everything. And so we start limiting our world so that we can feel a sense of control or safety, but it's like a bomb could drop then. There's an infinite number of things that could go wrong, and I think especially in cases of like trauma that I've worked with where someone really wants to avoid something, it's because they think that they can control something bad from happening, right? Like they can prevent something bad from happening. But the reality is that like that's not always true. And so you can do kind of what you can to manage actual threat, but then there's a point of like diminishing return, right? Like maybe you lock all of your doors because you don't want someone to break in, and maybe you put up a camera system, and maybe you even arm yourself, whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable, and still there is the reality that someone could sneak past all of that. And so I think it's about managing fear, like what it feels like is manageable, what is probably realistically not manageable, and kind of going from there.
I'm curious if you have advice about tracking your progress as you're becoming more gritty. Is one thing I've noticed for myself is that I often don't give myself credit for the change that has happened until I'm years out from things and can notice the difference between who I was and who I am now. What kind of things do you do to track your progress?
Well, unfortunately, I'll give you the psychology answer. It kind of just depends. But in a case of like what Harrison mentioned, like a traumatic event and seeing approach behaviors, we might use a standardized measure like the PCL, which is like a PTSD checklist. And you can give it to someone, it gives you a raw score, and then I can make a pretty graph, right? That's like what I might do in therapy, doing routine outcome monitoring. But I think that part of what can be helpful if we're just talking about the average everyday kind of thing is like thinking about your goals and taking notice of progress, like making an intentional effort. Like I have a goal to ride my bike 100 miles or something, and giving yourself a little celebration at like 25 miles or 50 miles, or maybe 51 was the hard one, but maybe 50 for some reason worked out just fine. There's a creator on Instagram that I really like who is on this like weight loss journey because they felt it has negatively impacted their health. And they like to make a video about what they call non-scale victories, like a shirt fitting better, a belt fitting better, whatever it is. But they take a moment to notice. And I think that sometimes when we're very goal-directed, we don't get to experience the now, the success of today. And so what I would say is like, try to get out of your mind and into real life. Can you notice? Make it a practice of noticing.
You showed some models that show how anxiety gets reinforced, but I wondered if you could also talk about how anxiety can lead to depressed mood or
Sure.
those sorts of things.
Yeah. So with my clients, I always like to make this joke that anxiety and depression are like brother cousins, two different sides of the same coin in a way. Anxiety can limit our experiences, right? So if we think about social anxiety, for example, we can avoid going to a party or a talk or whatever because we think it's going to go badly. And so we avoid that. We end up sitting around feeling a little bit miserable because all of our friends are at the party, but we're not. That can lead to isolation, which is connected to depression. The worry before bed can lead to poor sleep, which is connected with depression. And many of the criteria of anxiety are also transdiagnostic. The ones that exist in depression often exist in anxiety, like poor sleep, poor concentration, things like that. And so I think oftentimes the limiting of life experience, the ruminative process of like worrying in a circle, can lead to feelings of depression or can change like your mental schema of yourself. It's hard to feel happy when you feel like a person who loses instead of a person who tries. Any other questions? Go
I
ahead.
don't know this. I think you already answered this. It's sort of a comment based on what Harrison was saying. Because when you mentioned the thing about the emails and our anxiety being like maladaptive, I really started to think about some very specific and relevant experience I've had in prior work, where answering an email wrong can cost you your job and your life. I mean everything. And it almost feels like it's not even really maladaptive, that the anxiety we experience with like these minor things actually has like real like world consequences in our society, that there maybe is no actual solution because we are constantly stressed, because sometimes every little action that we take matters so much, and we just have to recognize that. And then sometimes there's no release, like a CEO having a heart attack or whatever, and it's just like, well, that's just their job, you know. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm just having the wrong perspective on this, so you can sort of correct it, or that was just something that popped into my head.
No, I mean, I think it's a fair like thought to have, right? Because you're right, even though a email cannot kill us, it could take like the food off of our table if it goes wrong. That's true. And anxiety in that way is meant to help us, like to stay kind of like alert and like, okay, this is an email to my boss. I need to be careful. I need to double check my sent folder to make sure I set it the correct way. But after that, what good is anxiety gonna do to keep worrying, to keep managing it, right? That's kind of, for me, the line of maladaptive is like, it was working for you. You were alert, you thought about the email, you thought about the way that your boss might respond. You may have taken out the kind of grouchy transition word that was in there, you know, per my last email is what I like to add. You may remove that because anxiety is like, hey, this matters, right? But to go home and worry through the night when the email's sent, there is nothing to do but wait. In that point, that's where I think anxiety can become maladaptive. When it becomes repetitive, circular, and is a way for us to try and kind of avoid the reality, which is we're anxious about the email. That's natural. But worrying and worrying and worrying to the point that you can't sleep, that's where it becomes maladaptive, and where we can lean on skills like grounding or connection, or in some cases even distraction if it's a problem enough. Yeah. But you're right, anxiety won't go away because it's a natural emotion that we probably evolved to have, which in some ways good, in some ways bad.
I actually wanted to ask you about that because you've mentioned evolution a few times now.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have is, us humans as a species, we've been around for, I don't know the science, it's been a long time since I was in high school or whatever, but my guess is hundreds of thousands, millions of years, I don't know. I'm almost 40 years old, I'll be 40 next year. I've watched like the internet and everything come around the year 2000, smartphones and everything, and now we got very quickly AI's coming on board, and it's we're experiencing with all this technology and stuff. In my lifetime, I've noticed the effect of it because personally I can't keep up with it, and I'm wondering if there is like a biological and psychological, like say like evolutionary, like we have these mechanisms built in, like you said, anxiety is there for a reason, it's a tool. It's to, basically it's like pain, it gives us, our body a signal, and we need to figure out why it's, okay, what's causing that so we can respond instead of reacting. But like with the rate of change nowadays in modern society, we're not used to change going so fast, and it's speeding up exponentially every year. It's like, I mean, scientists talk about this all the time. We experience, I don't know, like they say like decades worth of change, where in the past it would be like, or like nowadays we'll experience decades worth of change in just a few weeks, and it's just increasing all the time. And I'm just wondering, like sometimes with the anxiety, is that mechanism is built in from our evolution, and it's like almost hardwired in, and we just cannot keep up with the rate of change. So what's the science, where's the science on like understanding that nowadays? Because like I understand there's some things we can do to like learn and adapt, but we're not used to, I mean historically speaking, if you look at history over the long period of time, we're not used to such fast rate of change. And so I wonder if you can say anything about that.
Yeah, I can't say like specifically what science or psychology says, but this is like a common topic, at least in therapy. And one of the things that we often talk about is like lots of change can happen rapidly, right? Like imagine like losing a loved one. That's been happening since the beginning of time, of course. And when you lose a loved one, you could have like a rapid financial loss, a huge shift in identity, and yet people persist. And so even though maybe we're experiencing change at really high rates, what I would say is that we know how to experience change. And remembering, at least for me, like life does change, and that's a guarantee. In some ways that's horrifying, and in some ways it's kind of lovely. And so in the same way that it can change for the negative, it could change for the positive. But worry is going to reorient us to thinking about change in the negative rather than seeing the positive. And so for me and my clients at least, I might say, even if you're not used to the rate of change, you have been through rapid transition. What are the things that helped you survive that? Could it help again? Could we change it a little so that it could help again? I would say in that way we can rely on ourselves, which for me is very hopeful. I think maybe one.
No, you have time. You have plenty of time.
Okay. Anna?
You mentioned that before you go to sleep, sometimes you can be worrying, and then we know that lack of sleep can cause a lot of problems, like
Shout out
the
Red
next day or
Advisors.
throughout your life. So can you speak a little bit of how that anxiety can contribute to poor sleep and how that works?
Sure. So this is a great plug. Anna and I just wrote a paper about this. But anxiety can, one of the most common ways that I see anxiety, at least in my clinical practice, impact sleep is through rumination before bed. So basically, we're back with Pavlov and his dogs, right? We have bed nice. It's warm, it's comfortable. If it's mine, it's made and ready for me every night. The bed is nice. Suddenly, we're laying in bed worrying, are the rivers gonna run? Is the world gonna turn? Is my paper gonna get submitted? Or did the email go wrong? Etc., etc. We have now paired nice bed with bad thing. It's not a good idea. Beds are supposed to be for sleep and sex, not for everything else. Let's not use our bed as a place to worry. If you find yourself really connected to worrying right before bed, in bed, get out of the bed. Go somewhere else. So one way that I think about it is like when you hear people talk about like being highly anxious and having bad sleep, the thing that I see most commonly is like worrying a lot before bed. Green Day says, I'm having trouble trying to sleep. Same kind of thing here. Go to Brain Stew, that'll help you. Any other questions? Zach?
Great talk. I'm actually teaching anxiety tomorrow, so I'm stealing some lines
Nice,
from this.
please.
I'm curious, maybe I'm oversimplifying the constructs here, but like, if anxiety is this future worry, how does that maybe relate to highly impulsive behavior? Like, I'm not thinking through consequences. Are those, like, if you, as a clinician, would you view those as like different spectrum that are both maybe someone who's highly impulsive but also highly anxious? Like, do they fight each other, or how does that work?
I think that anxiety, like if we think about, kind of like the cognitive bandwidth theories, right? It's like this idea that you have only so much bandwidth to work with in your brain, and then you're highly anxious, it's taking up some of that bandwidth, and then you don't have a lot left now to self-regulate. So you impulsively grab that, third pack of chocolate donuts or whatever. It's harder to regulate self-control there. The other way that I look at like self-control through the lens of anxiety is attentional control. Do you have the ability to turn your mind away from worry and into the world? Do you have the attentional control to not focus only on worry? It can be really tough, especially if you've created a habit, right? Like maybe you've created a habit of worrying in your car on the way to work. Is it possible to create a practice of listening to music on the way to work, and when you notice your brain drifting to worry, can you say, thanks brain, I already did that, I'm going to listen to Brain Stew by Green Day now. So that's kind of how I connect it, like these two paths. Because people who are highly anxious, sometimes they make choices that they really regret and feel a lot of shame about it. Like, I know that I should have, done the thing that scared me, but in the last minute I backed out. I impulsively decided, nope, not going to the party. And my thought there is like the amount of anxiety you have may make self-control harder. So let's try and do in those cases where we may need to bring it down and take a moment, take a rest, let it rise and fall naturally. Again, let's not kick a down dog. We don't need to add to it. Notice it. What is this trying to tell me? I'm worried about a social situation. I wonder why. Maybe because it's new. Maybe I'll do my absolute best to not talk too much about neuroscience, unless it's a neuroscience girl like Zach, and then case I will. So that's kind of how I think about it. Thanks for the question.
Is it possible to go too far the other direction into grittiness? And like I've encountered this term counterphobic, where you have a lot of fears, but your tendency is to run straight at them. Is that something you run into?
I don't know that I've had I've had clients like that, particularly in the trauma domain, but maybe not in the like college anxiety domain. But I would say yes. Like I like to think about anxiety as like an alert system. So like imagine your fire alarm. You want it to be more cautious than not, right? Like you don't want your fire alarm to be like a casual fire alarm. But you also don't want it to beep all crazy all of the time either. And so what I would say is like everything, it kind of depends. Like sometimes we need to run headlong. If you dip your toes into the pool a million times, it always feels cold, but if we can just get a cannonball, pool's nice now. So in some cases, I think it makes sense to jump right in, and in some cases, we're talking about something that could be truly dangerous, right? Like, I may jump headlong into the Wilson Park pool, but I shouldn't do that at the creek, where the levels are different, right? And so I think ultimately, like, it kind of depends, but I do think you see people who are really anxious and may kind of like, they just lose the capacity to manage self-regulation or self-control at some point.
Can I ask one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just in your experience, what's like the most, in general speaking, like what's the most successful therapy that's out there, like cognitive rehabilitation type therapy that kind of works overall for most like anxiety disorders? Do you know of any or?
Yeah, I love to give, and it just depends. But cognitive behavioral therapy has a lot of research backing that shows that it can be helpful. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapies, that's kind of like, it's going after both cognition and behavior. So like, let's not avoid, and let's challenge the thoughts about what avoidance is doing for us. Let's challenge our fear or our assumptions. So that's one way. Another one is like a third wave therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, which is like, I'm going to accept that I'm anxious and commit to value-based choices going forward. I accept that I'm anxious about talking. Sharing science is a value that I carry, so I'm going to make the choice to do the valued action. So it kind of depends, but CBT and ACT, I would say, are probably most common in this area, and have a strong evidence base behind them.
What is ACT?
Acceptance and commitment therapy.
Oh, okay.
It's like CBT, but adds a layer of acceptance and mindfulness that was not in all of the original CBTs, I would say. But there's CBT for lots of stuff: depression, anxiety, insomnia. There's lots of ways to apply that model to wellness, I would say. Okay. Any other questions, you guys? I think we're at time. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for an excellent talk. It
Thank
was
you.
wonderful, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I want to just pitch really quick as a librarian. If you ever have questions about technology, I can tell you right now, a lot of technology is duct taped together with a fancy light on top, and there's a lot of money that goes into making you think that's not the case. So if you ever have a question about your phone or computer, you can always ask us here at the library. And on Sunday, we'll have another program from a UA author on Open to Emotion, her book about regulating and managing emotions, particularly negative emotions. So I think a lot of you who enjoyed this talk today would enjoy that program as well. Before you leave today, don't forget to do a program evaluation at the back. And for those of us listening online, we do have a program evaluation on our website. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Thank you.